interestingly, I've got Darren Grimes on the line. He is obviously Reform UK's deputy leader of Durham Council. He's someone who does want to do something about this foreign aid. I was just about to say a really bad word there. This dumpster fire, this absolute dumpster fire of what is going on with our foreign aid. I mean, I've got some crazy stats here, but let's welcome Darren to the show first. Darren, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
I feel like I'm sandwiched in between a friendship here.
We go back.
Darren was my television mentor, which probably explains my very middling skills on the screen.
Darren, thank you so much.
I still miss my Willie, Samara. I still miss my Willie, so there is that.
Don't we all? Look, the UK taxpayers are on the hook. They're for millions of pounds. I've got a bit of a list here. I don't want to get into it too much, but, you know, we've got 114 million on inclusive green enterprises in India, 9.5 million on accountability and inclusion in the Congo, 5 million on transforming feminist funding in Iraq, and a 500k fleet of Porsches for Albanian jails. I mean, our foreign funding is out of control. Now, Nigel Farage has unveiled a plan to basically fill the $25 billion black hole that Rachel Reeves moans about and laments about day in, day out. He said, why don't we just cut it? Why don't we cut it by 90%? Why don't we just give 1 billion out, which in my mind is actually still too much.
1 billion too many.
Darren, what is Reform's plan for cutting foreign aid? Because there's nothing that gets our callers more wound up than foreign aid spending.
Absolutely, and rightly so. You know, I think both the Tories and the Labour Party have a lot to answer for in this regard. You know, you mentioned that there was, I remember back when I worked in Westminster, that there were salt lessons to the Chinese, or, you know, being paid for by British taxpayers on having too much salt in their diet. We're basically stuck in a cult of compassion in Britain, right? Where actually being kind is better than being seen to be good to the British people. It's a self-harm ritual where hard-working British families, you know, those in County Durham who don't have a lot in life but do work damn well hard, are being squeezed right now until their eyes water, right? And the government can basically congratulate themselves on handing out as much of our money to foreign governments and foreign nationals as possible. Even foreign nationals who have entered this country illegally is £1 too much being spent on foreign nationals, in my view. But the real problem goes to the very heart of the political class being one that worships that word, compassion. As long as someone else pays the price, it ain't them paying the price. As long as they can feel that warm glow of virtue, you know, the bricks in Durham don't actually matter ultimately, as long as the tax bill keeps actually landing as a consequence of those bricks being laid. And we are the only party willing to actually say we need to be as radical about this, on this, as possible. You know, these are the things that politicians normally whisper around dinners after one too many glasses of wine. Charity begins at home. I have been told that for as long as I've been on this planet, but at the moment it doesn't even begin. We're getting out, Samara. We get absolutely bare minimum. So the 25 billion quid in savings, it's quite astonishing that we can even find a figure like 25 billion from such a bill. But you mentioned it, 100 million quid to Pakistan for family planning. I couldn't give a flying flamingo about the family affairs of people in Pakistan. Not my problem. The people of Durham, the people of Britain, they're my problem.
Darren, I'm sorry, Samara, but I've been waiting to grill Darren on live radio for some time. I don't disagree, mate, with anything you've said, obviously, but we both know that this is low-hanging fruit and it will be popular with the Reform base, probably popular with the vast majority of the nation. We also know that this doesn't come anywhere near addressing the mountains of debt that this country is currently dealing with. I think there's something like £110 billion a year that's just going on interest to service the national debt. So my question is
this not a good start, though? I mean, we're spending 14 billion.
It is a good start. Don't let him off the hook.
It is radical.
It is a good start, Darren. I agree with you. But above and beyond this, above and beyond scrapping net zero, which is also fantastic, and above and beyond basically stopping migrants from getting benefits, I haven't heard enough yet from Reform on the spending cuts that will be needed to actually address the dire financial situation this country is in. When are we going to start hearing some really tough cuts from Reform?
Well, I would argue that actually the personal independence payments cuts are some of the most radical tax benefits, welfare cuts that we've ever heard from a British opposition politician. You know, moving the non-serious cases like anxiety back to work programs instead of actually not focusing on those who have real disabilities being protected by the welfare safety net. You know, that's saving £3.5 billion. It is grotesque, actually, Will, and I do agree with you that we have actually managed to become so desensitized to the numbers of billions of pounds being spent on these things that they seem pretty abstract, but actually they're not. They do matter. 25 billion quid is a lot of money. The send costs that we are facing as a council, for example, are bankrupt and local authorities around the country, send being special educational needs children. Now, Will, you could say your child's got anxiety these days and manage to get them a free taxi to school. That's a statutory requirement for local authorities. There are so many ways in which a Reform government coming in, trimming the fat, being able to actually reform the system will save billions. And don't doubt how big a saving scrapping net zero will be. It was Philip Hammond, not exactly himself, a tax-cutting Chancellor when he was Chancellor of the Exchequer, who said it would cost the economy £1 trillion. That is a huge, huge sum of money. We'll all be walking around in loincloths and living in caves if actually they get their way. And I do not have a summer body ready, Samara, for a loincloth.
You and me
I don't
both.
know about you.
You and me both, Darren. Seriously, oh my God, these British winters, they're not great when I have to fly back to Australia for Christmas and sort of look at myself in a bikini. It's a lot of self-hatred. But anyway, you know, the thing is, back onto foreign aid, you know, I don't agree with you, Will. And, you know, I think Reform always gets bundled in with the Conservatives quite a bit. I've always thought of Reform as actually economically quite liberal and socially more conservative. That's what I've always thought their policies were. I might be wrong, but that's how I've seen them. And I think that they just want to spend the money in the right way. I mean, they've got a whole Doge department dedicated to sort of blasting all these crazy spendings in the council and sort of having a look at
I don't think you can pigeonhole us. I don't think Reform can be pigeonholed in that way, to say that we have economic liberalism, because, for example, we want to nationalise British Steel because we see it as a key strategic asset that's needed for any functioning economy, and especially one that could potentially face war in our lifetimes. You know, that is a genuine prospect, and we do need to have these key elements within our country. But there are many people who would disagree with me vehemently and say that the market will ultimately provide even at wartime. So, you know, I don't think we can be pigeonholed. I think we're pro-common sense, Samara. That's basically what I would argue we are, because what we have right now isn't compassion for Britain. It's actually total insanity for Britain. While the whole of the rest of the world subsidise and put their people first, we have children who, you know, are struggling at the moment, unable to read and write and all the rest of it, in completely destitute conditions that wouldn't have been shrugged at in Victorian Britain.
Now,
completely agree. And just to add to that point, I was outside a migrant hotel just a couple of weeks ago reporting, and I spoke to a mother who said, you know, I actually have to choose between giving my child a meal for her first lunch break or an after-school snack. That's how skint I am right now. And literally across the road from me are migrants receiving 3 meals a day paid for by her effectively, because she goes to work and she cleans toilets. So you're right, that is on the ground what's going on, just probably about 30 kilometres from Westminster. So yeah,
compassion,
you're right.
Samara. Where is your compassion? That's what Labour would say.
But this is the thing, that sort of suicidal empathy, that whole kindness and compassion rhetoric, which started under Blair and then was continued under the Conservatives, is now so ingrained in the institutions and in the instinct of the nation that, Darren, you know as well as I do, the Reform is going to be attacked mercilessly every week for the next 3.5 years. We saw it from The Guardian yesterday. Stupid stories coming out.
It just has been by you, William.
Well, no.
Where are your priorities, man?
You know,
Save Britain, don't reform.
I am, to quote, you know, the great, you know, Bill O'Reilly on Fox News, I'm just asking questions, Darren. The question that I have for you is, How are you guys thinking about how you're going to combat the smear campaigns that will say that Reform are evil, that they're racist, that they're not kind, that they're not compassionate, all that sort of stuff that you know is coming from the mainstream media?
Well, actually, we've just had it over the last 24 hours with The Guardian publishing 15,000 words in its pages on how Nigel Farage allegedly said something when in the 1970s when he was at school that they deemed to be anti-Semitic and all the rest of it. Exactly. Grasping at straws, desperation in extremis, all the rest of it. It totally is. But I, quite frankly, will not take lectures from a paper that has given succour and support to those who want to aid and abet Britain's enemies at every twist and turn. You know, Jeremy Corbyn had a free pass. Owen Jones has had a free pass in that paper for far too long. The British people aren't going to have truck with that. And I think actually these smears, these baseless smears, are they're not landing anymore. So they're going to come in thick and fast. I've lost count of the number of times I've been told I'm a Nazi, I'm racist, I'm a fascist, all these other things. I'm homophobic even. I've had to call up all my ex-boyfriends, Samara, and say, look, I've got something to tell you. I'm homophobic. They said, Darren, you never are. Honestly, it's absurd. And I think the country recognises now that it is absurd and that they are baseless, desperate attempts at undermining what is a case against the consensus that has been built up since Tony Blair. We need to undo the Blairite project.
All my ex-boyfriends. I'm not convinced there would have been that many calls, mate. But...
How dare you?
Excuse me, Will. You're about to get banished from this studio. Be nice to my lovely guests. Look, I agree with you, though. You know what? Where was The Guardian calling out the anti-Semitism of Keir Starmer when he recognised Palestine as a state? I mean, I don't want to be lectured on anti-Semitism by them. I mean, they've absolutely got no place to be calling it out.
Can I also just ask Darren quickly, because you did mention the loony left. You mentioned Corbyn and you mentioned the Greens. The Greens are going up in the polls. Polanski is getting some cut through with the media. I'm actually thinking of putting a cheeky bet on having the next, in 2029, a Reform government and a Greens opposition. How much of a threat do you think the Greens are to Labor on the left?
Labour on the left, they absolutely are a threat. But I would actually argue, certainly in the County Durham context, that it's the Liberal Democrats. You know, the Liberal Democrats are doing incredibly well, and those who actually think that the Green Party is nuttier than a fruitcake. I mean, let's not forget, you only have to tear through the pages of the Google search a few times to actually find an article in The Sun from this august institution of News UK, where he actually said he could expand a woman's breasts by using his mind. You know, I think ultimately people are just going to laugh at that. The loony left, of course, they will vote for someone like him. There'll be a lot of young people do, but don't discount the number of young people who don't feel they have a future, who see British industry that they want to work in destroyed, who decimated at every twist and turn. Every day we have a new story of a new factory that's closed down. That's fewer opportunities for young people who will come out and vote for Reform UK. I think you'll be surprised by the number of 16-year-olds when Starmer does gerrymander the electoral cycle, who do actually come out and vote Reform, especially in areas like the northeast of England.
No, you make a really good point. I think Starmer thought that he was sort of engineering the next election by allowing 16-year-olds the vote. I don't think he's met a 16-year-old. They make me look like a liberal snowflake, to be honest. Most of them do that I've met. You know, they're quite conservative, let's just say, because they're quite hard done by. They're the post 9/11 generation, and they've been absolutely slammed with sort of fiscal drama after fiscal drama. Not to mention they grew up in the 2010s where the woke brigade and the purple hair and the Tumblr and all that. I can tell you myself, it wasn't fun. That's definitely what made me into a sort of
but there are still plenty of those young loonies out there, and what Starmer didn't work out at the time is that he's splitting his own vote amongst young people towards the Greens, and if Corbyn can somehow get his act together, that party as well. Like, surely this was politically an act of self-sabotage and just political incompetence to lower the voting age.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course it was. I mean, everything that this man has ever done, you know, he thought that it would look tough if he actually said, I'll take the winter fuel payment away from pensioners and then doing farmers' inheritance tax. Actually, the country just turned around and said, you cannot prioritise this whilst you prioritise foreigners who are coming here.
Yep.
We're spending, you know, almost 10 billion quid, the asylum bill, and it's going up and up and up, not showing any signs of abating whatsoever. And they're seeing their communities completely transformed. There isn't, I think, any prospectus that he could offer the British people now that doesn't look like a complete continuation of a betrayal. No one believes Shabana Mahmood. You know, it's not going to actually cut through with the British public. They've had their chance, they royally blew it, and after 14 years of Tory government, I don't even think they looked as dead in the water as the Labour Party does right now.
All right,
and
put your money.
We ride that baby, because I swear to God, we need to get this government out of office. It is the very worst in my lifetime, and I say that with my hand well and truly on my heart.
Put your money where your mouth is. When will there be a Labour leadership challenge?
I think actually there'll probably be one after the May elections. I think the May elections will be so bad for them if they allow them to go ahead. But, you know, I'd argue that there are many people in Reform, Will, and I'm not speaking out of class in saying this, who actually believe that there'll be many elections don't go ahead, that they'll continue this farce of saying a move to being a unitary authority is enough to cancel an election for another year. And that's how desperate they are.
All this tough talk Shabana Mahmood kind of, you know, came up to the lectern and lectured us on. She's just posted about 9 hours ago. We are open. We are a tolerant and generous country. New, safe and legal routes for genuine refugees. I mean, I was on the BBC on Monday, I think it was, properly in the lion's den, and I was...
We forgive you for that, by the way.
Well, I thought I had to... You know, it shows how desperate they are for balance these days, isn't it? But one of the Labour MPs was just waffling on about how we need to make sure that asylum claimants can actually apply from any country in the world. I mean, this is actually how the Labour backbenchers are thinking. She was livid at Shabana behind the scenes.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. But, you know, they're saying that they're copying the asylum policies of Denmark, which has been pretty robust. I tell you what, they're not. They're copying the migration and asylum policies of Denmark Hill, you know, the leafy sort of suburbs that they actually want to appease to. And Shabana, in making that tweet, Samara, is actually saying, I am in complete thrall to the Labour backbenchers who are committing mutiny as we speak. Your previous caller, Gillian, I believe her name was absolutely right in saying that they're fighting like rats in a sack behind the scenes. Some of them doing it in public, and it's only going to get worse. So, you know, a plague on all their houses, I say, because both the Labour Party and the Tories have had their chance. You know, I say actually it's time for fundamental change, because if we don't get this right by 2029, it won't just be the foreign aid budget that spirals out of control. I think it'll be trust and faith in democracy itself, and a fundamental disillusionment with the British state that will lead to some pretty nasty consequences. So we need to get this right for the country, for Britain, and it isn't, I think, hyperbole to say we need to do it to save Britain, because we are in and drinking in, as Will would know a thing or two about, Last Chance Saloon.
Darren, you speak a lot of sense. We're going to go to break. I want to keep you just for literally 5 minutes more, because I've got another story I want to hear your thoughts on after these messages. Welcome back. Well, Katie says, Darren, I joined Reform last December and I agree with a lot of what they like to do. However, I live in North Yorkshire and the teenagers there are evil. They target kids with additional needs. They gang jump fight kids they don't like. They record it. They share it to all their friends. My point is, there are rare and extreme cases where children do get transport to school due to their fears of being targeted by bullies, and schools support and keep them safe and put them on reduced timetables, and the kids get away with it. My autistic teen was targeted by over 30 students, probably more. We had early help referrals, but then she ended up in Leeds, incubated due to overdosing on my hidden medication that that she found overnight. Due to desperation of wanting to be gone, we need less foreign aid money and more money put into services, and we need all the services being overhauled to run this country correctly. Then a lot of British people that would be better off. That's from Katie in North Yorkshire. I'm not sure if you were you heard that, Darren. That's quite interesting, isn't it? I think that
it is.
Yeah. What was your response to that?
It is, Samara. But I mean, what I would say to that is fundamentally, I think we've lost all semblance of discipline in this country. You know, kids simply aren't being disciplined. Antisocial behaviour in parts of the country like mine is spiralling out of control, and I think it's because we're scared to actually reprimand children these days. Teachers are terrified in classrooms. They cannot do it right for doing wrong in classrooms these days. We've lost all semblance of being able to tell a child that bullying a young autistic kid is totally wrong, sickening and all the rest of it, and they're getting away with it. So they're thinking that this behaviour is totally A-OK. And that's why there are so many calls on so many issues from, you know, we need to bring back some semblance of sanity on being able to discipline children. And they're talking about banning smacking and all the rest of it. I was smacked as a kid, Samara, and it didn't do me any harm.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I had those sort of hippy-dippy parents that were like, if the child's crying, hug them harder. Well, we see how that ended out. I become an absolute rat bag. So I think I agree with you, Darren.
In that case, Darren, we'll put your personality defects down to other issues, not the smacking. I've got a question going back to the topic that we were speaking about before the break, and that is on Shabana Mahmood's recent announcements on illegal immigration and Reform's response to it. Now, it's a relatively minor criticism, but it goes to the communications following that announcement. And I saw a tweet this morning, which in some respect was funny, which was Shabana Mahmood with superimposed photos of Nigel in her bedroom and having all the Reform merch, suggesting that Shabana is aping Reform's policies, when I don't think she is. When she talks about things like more safe and legal routes, I think she's missing the mood of the public. I don't think people want more refugees in this country. Similarly, she's still unwilling to say, if you get on a dinghy, you will never, ever settle here. And similarly, she's not willing to say that we're going to detain refugees and keep people, and particularly women and children, safe. So I see some fundamental differences between the Reform policy, as I understand it, and the Labor policy, and I'm not convinced that it was the right approach from Reform yesterday to basically suggest that Labor are aping them.
No, not at all. What they said, it's a play on the Labour Party falling apart over this, with her being accused of being Reform light by her own benches. You saw the same thing happen to Keir Starmer when he gave a speech and it was referred to as Enoch Powell. You know, the idea that, one, Enoch Powell actually was able to string a sentence together, but putting that to one side, you know, the merits of talking about these kinds of issues, there are some things that Shabana has said that I agree with. Fine, absolutely. But when they're not suggesting for 1 second that Shabana is actually going to join Reform, because fundamentally she disagrees with everything we want to do, i.e. leave the ECHR and actually be able to say to Euro judges, you cannot dictate the policies of a sovereign parliament. And that is what is happening right now. So until the Labour Party comes out full-throated and says, we're going to leave the ECHR, we're going to leave the UN Convention on Refugees and all these other things that actually hold us back, bind our hands as a country, like, dare I say, Australia managed to untangle itself from various conventions and other things to be able to genuinely take back control of its own territorial waters. We need to do exactly the same thing. And the Labour Party, you're on a hiding to absolutely nout if you believe that Shabana Mahmood is going to actually manage to coalesce the Labour Party to get behind an ECHR position. You know, I think what highlights this point more than any other was the Labour MP for Folkestone in Kent. The day before yesterday, he came out and he condemned Shabana Mahmood's speech, right? He condemned its lack of kindness, compassion, and all these other watchwords of the moment. Kent, you're talking about... I have a woman on our council, right, that came up here from Kent who knows people who have been in their homes and had migrants who've just landed on the beaches, walk through their estates looking for somewhere to go. You know, the idea that the people of Folkestone are going to get behind this Labour Party human rights lawyer, and that's what he is, exactly like Starmer. They've got more human rights lawyers than they've got voters at this current moment, at this current juncture. It's absurd. And so, yeah, Will, it was a play, it was funny, it wasn't serious. Take us with a smile.
The nuanced humour of the Reform X account is obviously a bit too nuanced for me. But
well, you don't have a sense of humour, Will. That's why.
One thing I would ask on that topic is, and I said this earlier on the show with Samara, that it is fundamentally the legal framework that the United Kingdom has become entangled in. That is the problem that stops us from stopping the boats. The ECHR and the Human Rights Act. Do you think there is any chance that Labor touches the ECHR or the Human Rights Act in this term of government?
I think that the Labour Party would sooner vote to scrap Trident, Britain's nuclear deterrent, than they would actually get out of the clutches of the ECHR. To be perfectly frank, and I do not wish to doubt the sincerity of politicians, Will, you know me better than that, but actually there are far too many people in the Parliamentary Labour Party that have made very good livings, that have received King's Council titles to their names, knighthoods and all the rest of it, from being these lovely, kind, compassionate human rights lawyers, that actually they would never in a month of Sundays vote for something that would be ultimately so detrimental to their own future prospects outside of Parliament. But that's me being cynical, Will. People can make of that what they will.
No, I agree with that, and that's the same argument you can make for net zero. If you scrap net zero, a lot of people are going to lose a lot of money because it's been a grip for a very long time.
I think we can also still see that Tony Blair's got his absolute claws still very much in Westminster, and he's still kind of operating a little bit behind the scenes. I don't say that in a conspiratorial type of way, but, you know, a lot of his policies, I don't want to really get into it, but, you know, the Fabian Society, etc., it still operates in a very strong way, and there is no way that the ECHR is going to be left under their watch. So yeah, it's not going to happen. I mean, I just think that, as you said, Darren, it's reform light, whatever Shabana's trying to put forward, and it's not even that. I mean, she's obviously cracked down on Angola, Namibia, and the Democratic Republic of Congo with her new sort of plan. What about Pakistan, who's had 11,000 asylum claims, topping the charts? They've got a space program. They're not at war or anything like that. They're a completely safe country. There's no one fleeing from a war-torn place coming from there. And then think about Iran, which is a very high-risk country, which we actually had a foiled terror plot towards the Israeli embassy happen. 3 of them were in an asylum hotel this year. So those are the countries she should be looking at, but clearly she doesn't want to upset some particular voter bases.
Can I add, Pakistan also has a Trans Rights Act, and they've got a lower debt to GDP ratio than the United Kingdom.
Yeah, I'm sure they do.
It is absolutely absurd the way that we characterise asylum and the way we characterise, I suppose, risk amongst the judiciary in this country. Darren, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, actually, you know, I would argue that the people that are being oppressed in Pakistan are Christians, you know, few and far between in that country at this point. But those people are killed, you know, they are chased down and murder is committed against them. We talked earlier, 100 million quid for Pakistani family planning. You know, the fact of the matter is, Pakistan has always, I think, had some semblance of a kind, benevolent British sort of pat on the back because of the fact that people look back at our history and feel some deep sense of shame. It's about empire shaming, you know. Yes. I remember when the Westminster Abbey flew the Pakistan flag, the national flag, above its building, and I felt deeply, deeply uncomfortable with that for the very fact that there are so many Christians in that country who do not feel that they are safe, that they have any semblance of human rights in the absolute sort of basic definition of that phrase in law. So ultimately, I have no truck with any of this. I do not, and the fact of the matter is, there are far too many people that do come over from that country who go on to do things that many of us, millions of us, find thoroughly objectionable.
You're
it's
right.
about reprioritisation, and some people from certain places are coming to this country in far too many numbers. But with that said, before someone clips this up, there are many people that I know who have come from Pakistan, second generation, all the rest of it, who are very good, decent people.
But my dad's from India.
There are far too many who aren't.
He's an Indian immigrant, and he didn't take a single day off for 25 years since he landed on the shores of Australia. So not by a boat, by the way. No. He came by a plane. It doesn't matter, though. He came to Australia legally. I agree with you. It's not an indictment on that. Are you now going to have an issue with that?
Yeah, well, I'm gonna touch the elephant in the room, because there's a very big difference between India and Pakistan, and that is because India is not a Muslim majority country. The vast majority of people who are coming from Pakistan are Islamic. There are many people, Darren, in this country who are deeply uncomfortable with the rising number of Muslims as a proportion of the total population. What is Reform's position on the changing demographics in that regard?
We're going to break at some point, Will, but yes.
What is Reform's position on the changing demographics in this country, and particularly the rising percentage of people who identify as Muslim in the United Kingdom?
Well, I think all of that fundamentally comes down to democratic consent. I don't think the British public were ever asked if they wanted to receive so many people in such high numbers, whether they be Muslim, whether they be Sikh, whether they be whatever else. I don't care if you're a Jedi. You know, ultimately, we did not actually give consent for the fundamental change of our country over such a vast and a short amount of time, where it's completely unsustainable for local government, central government, to be able to plan an economy in that way. And I hate that word because I sound like a communist, but you get what I mean. If you don't have the road infrastructure, if you don't have the housing, if you don't have all of these other things, how can you possibly accommodate that? And all of the while, you know, I saw today in at the House of Commons, a Labour backbencher asked the Prime Minister about the Islamophobia definition, bringing that, you know, it was touted about being brought into law. And actually it was said that it's going to be basically the way in which he's getting around reviving it is saying that it's an anti-Muslim law. Well, I'm sorry, but we don't have an anti-Christian law, do we?
Correct.
And we don't for very good reason, is that we don't believe in blasphemy, and we cannot allow I don't care where you come from. That is not how we do things here in the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And if you don't like that, then quite frankly, you know where the door is.
Couldn't agree with you more, Darren. I wanted to end this on, we're actually sending £19 million to Pakistan to combat child sexual exploitation. Interesting, because the grooming gangs still haven't had their, the victims who I've been talking to have actually been out with quite a few times, just in a social way, because they're lovely girls. They haven't received an inch of justice from this government, but it's nice to know that we've got 19 million in the back of the couch to give to Pakistan for their child sexual exploitation. Katie says, I agree with Darren. Things are spiraling. I'm hoping Reform can fix us. And Ernie says, Darren is completely right. Anthony also says the same. You've got a lot of fans here, Darren. Thank you so much for coming on the show. That's Darren Grimes, the legend himself, from Reform UK. Wow, what a man.